So I'll give it a couple more minutes just for more people to pop in if more people are coming in. I don't even know. Um, but I'll I don't know. I'll start yapping. This song was one of those like whole thing was an accident kind of thing. Um, it started with I started with this noise. This was my first use of my my first use of this kind with a spectral granulator, which of course I ended up bouncing so you can't see it. But this started out as a big fat saw stack. It actually started out as this. Where is it? That, and I put a big ol' granulator on it. And big fancy texture. And big fancy texture turned into, hey, this can be an intro for a song. So I opened up Splice and I found a whole bunch of like vocal ambient stuff. So I got this. And then I got this. And just kind of, I mean, the way that I make melodies is I just make an ARP and then refine it over and over again until it's a melody. So I threw an ARP over it that happened to be in the key of G sharp minor. And once I had an ARP, then I had a chord progression. You can even see the notes that I muted initially that were a full ARP. Actually, unmute those. Intro melody started out as this. Which, of course, ended up being the whole motif of the song. But this is the intro, so we can't have the whole thing right off the bat, so I just kind of muted some crap until I had a couple little instances of let's introduce the melody. Oops. Nope, on solo. I'm gonna do, what, 8 bars of that. And 8 bars is enough. I like to do the whole every 8 bars make something happen. So 8 bars, introduce the full melody. And at this point I've got that intro ambient vocal pad thing, the drone, layered with this guy. And also using another lead that I use for everything all the time. I might actually end up dropping this preset somewhere. This is a fun one. It uses kind of AU5's technique with Serum 1 to use the chaos oscillators to modulate the pitch of the main oscillators, but there is, at least when I made this lead, I couldn't find any sort of chaos oscillator here, but you can use a whole oscillator to modulate a whole other thing, so I just took the noise oscillator and did it with that. And if I... It's quite fun. I use that for everything, all the time. So, basically just a whole lot of sparkles. This is also an AU5 sound. These chimes. Definitely use that in a lot of stuff too. I should probably stop overusing that. More splice stuff. And then more splice stuff. Just a whole bunch of weird transition-y tonal stuff. What's up next? Okay, and then we go back to just having the melody existing in, like, the first bar. As kind of a, I guess, a lead into the first verse, followed by much more dink-donk. This one, of course, this time is heavily, heavily filtered. I think I also ended up stretching it out, too. I think this is, again, the bounced version, so tempo is going to show 174, but I'm pretty sure I had this stretched out to, like, 200-something, just because the artifacts that stretching makes are just really fun to play with. But very, 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 very simple lead-in to first verse. There's a sound here that I titled "It Happens Once" because it only happens once in the entire song, and it's a little kind of it tells the listener, hey, there's gonna be, like, it's gonna get heavier. There's gonna be cool sounds, and this is this is made with a rack of saturators and EQs. It's kind of nuts. This is a rack that, again, AU5 made. I think it's on his Patreon or something. It's either, no, I think it was in a YouTube video or something that he made, and I recreated it, and I ended up modifying it even more and turning it into something that I call Predator. But this was the first iteration of that, and I think this was the first time I had ever used it. But without it, just a very simple serum patch. Hello. Very fun. It does a lot. But that tubed and EQ'd a whole bunch. Cam freeze. That sounds like a you problem. Let me know if that doesn't fix though. But with a whole bunch of tube distortion, a whole bunch of EQ pulling down the mids a bit to shave it, it is quite a fun sound. And it's big. So really no genuine defined first verse. It kind of goes straight into a build-up, right at 33rd bar. And initially, the plan wasn't to have this, and it was just this. Oop. Which is cool. But there is now there ended up being a second layer that is 3 instances of serum in a rack that I've called Elenium. And this is actually all Serum 1, which I rarely ever use. But little Virtual Riot chord stack. Hello. Whoops. And then little Elenium, well, Elenium style chord stack. This is actually made by Jessel. Just a little more square action happening because there's a second wavetable that is very much not a saw. And that is layered with actually basically the same thing, but slightly less square. All the effects on these two layers are exactly the same. It's just that on this one, second oscillator is also a saw. Huge unison, absolutely maxed out. They're all very similar, but these last two, especially the very last one, just has a lot more stereo space. So it's quite nice. and of course, second layer also doesn't have the melodic notes on top of it. I mean, still very melodic, but it doesn't follow any melody as much as the top layer. It's just there to lay the foundation, I suppose. And this was, of course, my very first drum step track. I didn't really realize that that's the genre that it was when I first made it. But very drum focused, not so much heavy dubstep-y basses like I normally do. So main sounds that are happening in this drop are one of my favorite instruments that I call Black Garlic, which is very much a Bob's Burgers reference because it's my secret sauce. Main thing happening here is Vital. We'll silence everything else. And actually, Vital is most of what this sound is. It is the flange scrowl wavetable. I don't know if Glunk is a factory folder, but it's just that with data compression, or I don't know what comp is. I don't know if it's data compression, data compensation. I don't know what comp stands for, but it does weird things to the wavetable that make me happy. So we do that, and very, very tight envelope on it. What envelope is it? Yeah, envelope 2. Very tight envelope on it. And then just like a river white noise. Followed by Serum 2 for stereo stuff, OTT, filter just so I can control low pass, chroma because I'm lazy, more OTT, and then more Serum for more stereo stuff. Did I find myself channeling anything specific for this track? No. No, this was 100% vibes, and none of this was planned, none of this was anything besides, hey, this sounds cool. Okay, cool. This sounds cool. All right, what if I put these things that sound cool together and make something that sounds very cool? And that's what the whole song is from start to finish. For chords, you'll find me doing this a lot as well. I have a sub, and then oh, that's right, this is the old version of this rack. I can delete that. This is a rack that I have changed to now be called Crazy Crunch, and it's just a high-end layer. Maybe a little too much stereo on that, but it just gives the sub a little bit more crunch, which adds a stronger foundation, or lays a stronger foundation for the chords. Fun fact, if you want your chords to hit harder, chances are you don't necessarily need to make a huge giant chord. You don't need to add, a million octaves in your chord. You don't need to have a giant, yes, foundation reference, Isaac Asimov, my beloved. You don't need to have a giant add 9, sus4, or whatever. Just make a chord and have a really, really, really strong bass layer. And the way that I do that is just throw a sub down and then something with a whole bunch of high end, which I think is this. I think this does have a little bit of low end, which it's not supposed to have. Yeah, it does. This did end up needing like a 20 hertz roll off, which I think did end up getting fixed when the track was mixed. This is the pre-mix project file. I have more. This MIDI exists down here as well. More basses. This was my first use of keyform before it was keyform, and when I called it color filter, because it was initially just a color filter, and this was straight from AU5. Hang on, can I? Lot of fun movement. I should actually start using this more. Hang on. I think I changed some things around. Yeah, AU5's version uses 3 filter tables. I used only 2 for this, and I considered only using just 1. But having the second one softens it a little bit. There's more phase randomness. Very slightly more phase randomness, but there is technically phase randomness with that second filter. And that softens things, and I like it, so we use 2. Without color filter, this is still a cool sound. Oh, that's right, I also have chroma on it. So I did chroma and then another second color filter. But what? Wait a second. I'm gonna be honest, actually, I don't know what's happening here. Because the oscillators are off. What the hell? That's Serum effects. It's vital. Okay, I thought something was wrong. So it's vital. It's the same thing. Flame Scrowl, same thing as Black Garlic, but instead of the Black Garlic rack, this just uses the color filter and chroma. Jeez, I'd say it's been a long day, but it's 10 a.m. for me, so I've been up for an hour and a half. But the idea behind this track wasn't to be crazy heavy, so a couple of cool, colorful little watery basses, but really it's all rhythm and melody. This is probably the most complex part of the whole song. It's just that there's more things happening. Lot of bounced. Oh, that's right. This was gonna be something else, but I scrapped it. So just more of this vital that I thought was Serum, or Serum effects that I thought was Serum and is actually vital. Just turning on and off color filter because the color filter also has more spectral movement, more filter movement. But always chroma. Chroma always on because Vourem uses chroma. And this was just a bounce of, like... Actually, this is the bounced version of OTT pre-ringing when I turn the release all the way down on something but crank everything else, and then I bounced it and used all the weird noises that happen after the sound stops, and then reversed it, faded it in, and it has a little laser thing. I think I ended up putting chroma on this one as well, and then bouncing that again. How do I set up my side chaining? Sidechain is all on buses, and then everything is just routed into the buses. So everything that happens during the verses is in my little verse sounds group, which has sidechain rack on it. There are... Yeah, I love volume automation sidechain is so nice. It's much... I prefer volume automation sidechain much more, especially for low end, because sidechain compression on the low end isn't always going to sound quite right. It's not always going to pull stuff down the way that I need it to be pulled down. But volume is volume. So, kickstart. There are 4 instances of kickstart, because I used to have a group for drums that exist only in the verse, and then drums that exist only in the drop. But I have since changed that, and I only use one group for all my drums. But I never deleted the other kickstarts. So it's all routed through these 2. This handles kick, this handles snare. It's very, very tight, pretty short. I like snappy sidechain. Some people like snappier sidechain than I do. I don't like it too crazy. But all sidechain is just routed through this group, is routed through here, and then we don't worry about what happens there. I've got a strange setup. But all the sidechain is the same. Something that I remember Deadmau5 mentioning once in one of his master classes is that, oh, you should never use the same sidechain for everything. You should always have different sidechains so that the humanization, so that the differences in values make it sound more humanized. But I don't care, really. So Deadmau5 can suck it. I am probably the world's biggest Deadmau5 hater. So if Deadmau5 says a thing, chances are I probably don't do that thing. But I route everything through one single sidechain. The funky little glitchy stuff. This sound right here. This song was the first of a lot of the first of a lot of techniques that I use, and this was the first time that I really started playing with legato and glide. My notes don't bend a lot. I do a lot of like, this note is this note and it stays this note the whole time. But with this track, I figure, I can really play with legato. And so I have it here, too. I'm going to turn off sidechain. And then this guy. And I started using that more and more in a lot of songs since Ampule. Nothing really more than that. Just wanted to mention cool legato thing that I do. But fun little lead-in to the bridge. So for this section, the whole idea was to bring back the same idea that I had in the intro and the lead-in to the first verse / build-up, where I just introduced that, single bar of melody. But, of course, the drop has already happened, so things can get more exciting. So I also have the chords doing fun filtered chord things. Again, chords following the melody a little bit. And it's very simple. It's just that melody, those chords, and, the basses and weird bass hits. Tune clipper. There you are. This guy. Also, Black Garlic. I really, really like Black Garlic. This is heavily compressed. Twice. Black Garlic generally does have 2 instances of OTT, but it's kind of cranked on this. And then I think when this track was mixed, that compression got cranked even more so that there's more artifacts and more stuff happening. If you've heard Ampule, you know what this sounds like. It's funky. I initially, funny, when I first heard the post mix with this sound, I heard all the compression happening on it, and I thought, wow, that's the worst shit I've ever heard in my life. But it grew on me a whole bunch. And Frank's Red Hot didn't exist when this track was made. But unless you're referring to Keyform, in which case Keyform also didn't exist. Let's see. I think this was meant to just be, this is muted. Yeah, initially there was going to be this under the chords too. But for obvious reasons, I scrapped that. I can actually delete that entirely. So just fun little lead-in, and then an actual bridge. I love bells. I'm a big bell boy. My name is Esteban Julio Ricardo Montoya de la Rosa Ramirez. I'm your bellhop. I thought that was funny. big into bells. I didn't make either of these sounds. These are just Serum 2 presets. There is this guy. Technically not a bell, but it works. Trust. Big bell is this guy. CJ gets it. And then also more sounds from AU5, because I can't stop using things that Austin makes. I forget what song of his this was from, but this is almost identical. Very, very, very few modifications on this from his original version. I added a second delay to this. Oh, Ableton crash. Oh no. Well, welcome back. I added delay on this because Austin's version has delay, which is great. It's fine. I don't love how he did it, but I kept it. He's got quarter notes on left and right side, no ping-ponging, very, like, pinched right at, like, 1100 hertz or so. And that's, that's fine. But it's very centered delay, and one of the reasons that I use delay on anything anyway is to add more stereo space. Jessel might hate me for that one, because that's not, like, an actual stereo technique, but that's my stereo technique. I put delay on stuff so that it's everywhere. But I wanted to keep this, but then also just introduce half notes on the left side, so there's a little bit more back and forth. Just don't let Mithril's stereo expert hear that, I guess. And then just Pro Q3 to tame the mids that were clipping a whole bunch. Actually, to tame a lot the mids. That is some pretty drastic dips. But mids are too much without it, so we dropped those down. I probably could have gotten away with doing, like, dynamic EQ, but I very, very frequently find myself forgetting that FabFilter lets me do that. So I didn't do that. But enough of that. Oops. Next section. This is my favorite part of the whole song. It was originally only going to be this long. The first version, it was only 8 bars of that, but 8 bars wasn't enough. It's a cool part of the song. It's bouncy and it's fun, so 16 bars it is. This was also, I don't want to say it's the first time I've done this, but it's one of very, very few times that I've done this where I've used an ARP, but I don't let the ARP follow the chord progression. This is very much just G sharp minor add 9 as an ARP the whole way through. But the chord progression is very much the same. And it adds... This is kind of an ARP version of something that I do a lot with my chords, where I'll take a root note, or in some cases, I'll take the 9 of whatever key I'm in and have that 9 run through the whole progression. I just did that, but with an ARP. So you get this. And so on and so forth. I'm like, this is reaching the point where I'm like embarrassed to say that, hey, look, another AU5 technique. It's not really an AU5 technique, but I heard a split second of him doing something very, very similar to this in a very old video of his, with I don't think he was using a sine wave, but my interpretation was sine wave with pitch modulation. I know there's nothing to be embarrassed about, but this song is probably about 40 to 60% AU5 sounds and samples. And like, there have been a lot up until this point in the song. There have been a lot of, oh, this is an AU5 sound. But that's how I got my baby AU5 nickname, is I use a lot of his stuff and I use a lot of his thought processes. I watch a lot of his videos and I think, oh, I know what he's thinking. I know how he's thinking. I understand his thought processes in a lot of things. And I, partially by coincidence, partially by I'm a big fan of him, end up following similar processes. But enough ADHD tangent. This thing. Oh, my cat's fucking with my... Hang on. Hey, move. Move. Cat. You go onto the bed. Sorry. But he did something very similar to this in some song of his. I don't fucking know which one. But I caught like 2 seconds of it once, glancing at a video he had made a long time ago. I was like, oh, hey, that's a neat idea. So I do stuff like this a lot in bridges because it just adds more tonal ambient stuff. And the hi-hat loop, can you guess who I got that from? Oh, it's bounced, I can't show you. But it's AU5 thing, much more recent thing. It's his drum resynthesis. I made a hi-hat loop with it, and I'm a big fan. And usually, I didn't do it this time, but usually what I end up doing is when I make hi-hat loops like this, I will also sidechain them to the drums, to the rest of the drums. Because I find that if the snare hits at the same time as a very loud open hi-hat, sounds a little weird, especially with this style of hats where there is some white noise and dispersion going on. But in this case, for whatever reason, I didn't do it. But it's just 16 bars of this fun little midsection. Probably the most fun part of the song, in my opinion, to listen to. And then build up is the same. Second drop is a little heavier. Little bit. Again, when this song was mixed, that first bass hit ended up sounding very different. Very reminiscent of, like, classic mid-tempo. Just because of who mixed it. But that first hit, this guy, I did end up making a little bit more stereo just for the sake of this this breakdown. And weird filter movement. But it is... I have a rack called Powder That Makes You Say Thonk, which didn't used to be called Powder That Makes You Say Thonk. This is a rack that I got actually from Jessel. That I think the original rack was called Chain That Makes Basses Fucking Thonk or something like that. But I found it funnier to call it Powder That Makes You Say Thonk. Just brings out a whole bunch. Okay, so I got it from Revolpe. Got it. A whole lot of high end. And then overdrive on the low end. Just for fun, because crunch. And then also clipper for fun, because crunch. Big mega clipper for fun, because crunch. And then I think, yeah, that's one of my favorite stereo images in any sound ever. So hits with that, and then goes into filtered black garlic stuff. I'm fairly certain this is black garlic. No, this is serum, actually. This is a very old preset that I made called Water, because when I first made it, I first made a version of this that sounded like water if I had the LFO. Well, no, LFO was like this, at 16 and controlling the bandpass frequency, as well as it did at one point have my favorite kind of filter, phase 24 plus. Oh, it's not good. Fun fact, use that all the time. Subscribe for more pro tips. Excuse me. Don't use it on your sub. Don't use anything on your sub besides saturation, ever. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. And then just that layered with video game noises, and then everything compressed to shit. Maybe not compressed. Everything compressed and bit crushed. I originally had OTT on it, but OTT was not the play for that because it is a bass. This section's fun. I had, of course, my Crunchy Reese thing following the melody, which I almost never do. I never use my basses as leads, but in this particular scenario, bass was used as lead. And this this thing here, so the idea to have that little break and a downwards arp was taken from Modus. It was actually taken from Modus's remix of Snowblind. In fact, there were a couple of sounds that Modus had in his remix for Snowblind that gave me the idea for this track as a whole. I mean, of course, this track initially was an accident. I was playing with granulators, but having a silence break and then a almost raw saw doing like a thing for a split second, he has a couple times in his Snowblind remix. And I remember hearing that and thinking, whoa, that's the coolest idea in the whole wide world. So it's like, all right, I'm going to put this in Ampule. And that's what that is. Something's muted. Sorry, chat. Few fun basses here. Obviously, Black Garlic. Black Garlic's fun to mess with the wavetable position on, because you get all kinds of funky movement, but the movement is still relatively subtle because of all the processing that happens after. Oh my god, so low. So that's fun. The main thing that's happening there is just the wavetable position and like... Oh yeah, in this case it's just wavetable position that's moving. There's no fake phase filter. And then this guy is a lot of things. So normal sound is this. I use this preset a lot. This is also something that I made a long time ago with, you guessed it, AU5's oscillator resampling technique. This was just my favorite iteration of that. No, I fucking hate AU5. God, I hope I never see that man in my life. /J. But it's just that sound with I think a mid-side split. No, this was bit crushed and compressed. Just for funky, crunchy, high-end stuff. And then Spectral Resonator, not granulator for once. Whoops, no. Hush. We deal with you later. With a little bit, maybe like 36% of the dry signal coming through, mostly just heavily spectrally resonated. And then Chroma, again, because I'm lazy, but I turned out Morph, so it's okay. or something. You can't really hear the difference too much, but it helps remove some of the weird low, mid, and low harmonics that shouldn't be there. And then comb filter to make it do the comb filter thing. And then again down here, I just turned down the wet signal in the spectral resonator a whole bunch. I think the comb frequency is the same though, 1.83. Yeah, still 1800 hertz. And then whatever the hell macro 1 does, it is more of that the second time around. What does macro 1 do? We're gonna find out right now. Oh, there's a band reject. That changes. So less of that the first time than the second time. So it's a little bit more, I guess, crisp the second time around. Here's that ARP. Where's my ARP? There it is. The whole idea behind the progressions of my songs is that I like to, it sounds cheesy as hell, I know, but I like my songs to be a journey. The song takes you somewhere, but at the end, the idea is that the song brings you back. In this particular case, the song didn't bring you all the way back. It only brought you back to the bridge. Wait. Where? Here we go. So same ARP here. Also followed by, sorry, ARP follows this little string ARP thing. Again, same as the bridge / verse. So it doesn't necessarily bring you all the way back, but it brings you back to what I consider the most exciting part of this, or the most fun part of the song to listen to. And that's, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's the whole song. It was, the whole song was just vibes. There was not a lot of storytelling, which is a relatively new thing for me with music, is to actually use it to tell stories. There was not a lot of storytelling. There was not a lot of emotion that this song was necessarily trying to capture. This was, I played with a thing for long enough that I wanted to make a whole song out of it. And the main thing that this song was based off of was just this, what I ended up calling Dink Donk. It was just my funky little sparklies. And that these sparklies ended up being they ended up becoming a staple of the Vourem's sound, and these sparklies also played a role in creating keyform. Which, really quick, I've had a lot of people asking me, hey, what the hell even is keyform? People who have downloaded it and used it have still messaged me asking me what the hell that is. So really, really quick, just because it's only been about 45 minutes, this has been a short breakdown. I'm just going to go over really quick what keyform is and what keyform does. Because that's I love this sound. I love this effect. We'll put it on like a raw saw. So there's an unholy, don't put keyform on master. I will put keyform on master on this in a moment. You'll hear what it sounds like. It's terrible. Don't ever do it. But there is a ridiculous processing chain on this. Yeah, there you go. Make it big. So the main thing that's happening here is, whoa, shaper, filter table for the chordal effect, EQ because the low end is absolutely nuts after the OTT, and then reverb, which I don't always like, and Keyform V4 is probably not going to have the reverb because it doesn't sound. What are you guys doing? Jesus. Doesn't sound good on basses when there's reverb. But, oh my god. So, the cars are rebelling. They're causing chaos. There have got 8 macros. All the purple knobs control the chordal effect and the fake phase filter. And then all the red knobs control the spectral granulator, which I've made a rack for that I call the granulator. 90% of my racks are just workflow things, so I have to hit fewer buttons when I want to add an effect. But if you hover over Keyform's name, the info panel has a chart of all the numbers to set the chord pitch knob to relative to whatever key you're in. In this case, I'm in G sharp minor, so I can set that to 116, and it will imprint a G sharp minor 11 chord onto whatever note I'm playing. Hang on. That's a major. Hang on. Let me actually do a more interesting bass. There we go. So chord depth controls the chordal effect. Phase frequency. Good question. That is a stock Ableton device. I'll show you in a second. Actually, I'll show you right now. Next thing is the granulator, which is... Can I just shut most of these up? So that is Ableton's spectral resonator. I switch it to note mode so I can actually tune it to the specific note. We'll do G sharp 5. So first, normally it's just a resonator. But it has a granular mode, and it just creates a whole bunch of grains. So this followed by like a big fat multiband compressor. Doesn't matter if it's phase accurate or not. That followed by a big multiband compressor, and then usually like distortion or saturation or anything like that. Really fun. But I threw that into the rack so that you can also add sparklies to the sounds. We'll do G sharp 5. Keyform V4 will also include gain compensation because it does quiet things down as it reduces the dry signal. That's actually smart. That's a cool idea. I should try that. But speaking of putting things on master, y'all want to hear, do I put it on master or do I put it on sub? No, I'm putting it on master. I am, however, putting it before the clipper because I'm not that mean. But with Keyform on master, you get probably some of the worst sounds you'll ever hear in your life. Just kidding, it's soloed. Actually, Noah 10 years ago would have loved that effect and would have exported this song and posted this on SoundCloud. It's bad. It's bad. I used to actually put OTT on master, but when I say I put OTT on master, I mean like... No, not mid-side OTT. Hang on. I mean that I would do this after everything. No, not even like a limiter. I would do this, and I would bump this up to like 10, and that's what I would do. Granted, I was like 16, and I didn't know anything about anything, but that's what I would do. Oh, the low end is so bad. Hang on. Tristram from Monster Cat, is that you? But yeah, no, if someone who does that can make it onto Monster Cat, then Mithril can be Monster Cat 2.0. That's keyform. I'll drop that. I'll make there's keyform V3 is what I use the most, and that has a little bit of secret sauce that I can't necessarily give out, but I will make a keyform V4 that doesn't have the secret sauce but has everything else. That's a good idea, but I have a lot of people asking me about that. Figured I'd go over what that actually is and what it does. But unless anyone has any particular questions, that pretty much concludes my track breakdown. This was a track that was based solely off of vibes and experimentation. It's a genre that I don't normally do, and contains a whole lot of AU5 samples and techniques. So there you go. I want to see Doggo, yeah. You got dog? There's dog happening here? And the crowd goes silent. I wanted to say there was something else that... Ooh. 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 Dog. You want to see cat? I'll show you all cat. Hang on. Hang on. There. Have cat. Oh shit. There we go. Door. Sure. Well, that's all I got. Thanks for listening to me talk about a track I understand even... I probably understand the track more now than I did when I was making it. I don't really know what I was doing. You're welcome, Misfit. I love you, Misfit. I'm gonna pop off the stage for now. Thanks for hanging out with me, y'all. Thanks for listening to me yap. Farewell, everybody.